Good morning, everyone. To all the participants, welcome to Kashish Das Shrestha ji. Thank you for giving us some time today. Basically, as a because हामी थोरैजना छौँ, I think we can just mix हामीले सोचेको थियौँ कि we'll have some international participants too because उनीहरूले पनि चाहिँ join गर्छु भनेको थियो. And probably one of the friend from Pakistan will join soon to share her actions that she has been involved in. So यही क्रममा चाहिँ today I'm moderating the session fossil fuel extraction Boon or bane हाम्रो नेपालको लागि चाहिँ पेट्रोल उत्खनन नेपालको लागि आशीर्वाद हो कि श्राप हो भन्ने कुरालाई चाहिँ हामीले आज थोरै कसिसीबाट चाहिँ मोर डिटेलमा चाहिँ बुझ्नेछौँ र यही क्रममा चाहिँ हाम्रो सरी मेरो स्लाइड नै मुभ भयो So हाम्रो चाहिँ रुल्स रिक्वेस्ट प्लस गाइडलाइन्स वेबिनारको थ्रु आउट चाहिँ माइक चाहिँ म्युट गरिदिनु होला सबैजनाले विल गिभ सम स्पेस फर यु टु स्पिक आफ्टर टक मेन सेसन अनि केही क्वेरिजहरू कमेन्ट्सहरू क्वेसन्सहरू छ भने चाहिँ च्याट बक्समा हालिदिनु भइराखेको हुन्छ अर लेटर आफ्टर मेन सेसन चाहिँ हामीले कसैलाई बोल्नु मन छ भने चाहिँ विल अल्सो गिभ स्पेस फर देम टु स्पिक आउट also आफ्नो नेम चाहिँ ओरिजिनल नेमसँग रिनेम गरिदिनु होला अनि त्यसपछि अनइथिकल राइटिङ चाहिँ हाम्रो chat box or even as person communicate गर्दाखेरि पनि चाहिँ we do not allow त्यो चाहिँ if we find त्यो भयो भने चाहिँ हामीले वेबिनारबाट चाहिँ निकाल्छौँ we are very less त्यही पनि these are our rules and guidelines also request to everyone यो एकजना कसैले यो एडमिट गरिदिँदै गरिदिनु ल म यहाँ डिस्ट्र्याक्ट हुन्छु पोस्ट सलोनिका त्यो हेरिदेऊ ल
Okay,
गर्दैछु रुमहरुमा so talking about Powershift Nepal we are now running as an organization. We basically focus on empowering young females and women in the field of climate justice and other environmental issues. Young females are like capacity build or some environment advocacy focus on climate justice issue. And हाम्रो programs we basically focus on sustainable cities and communities. We try to develop our campaigns and projects related to these programs, sustainable cities, gender and environment, sustainable agriculture, mountain conservation, environment development and sustainability, women empowerment, skill-based. So हाम्रो basically Powershift Nepalले चाहिँ overall campaigns, projects अनि trainings activities जति पनि community अनि overall गरेर हुन्छ हाम्रो सबै चाहिँ यतिमै focus भएर नै हामीले आफ्नो objectives goals set गरेर गरिरा हुन्छ So as a webinar, why today's webinar भन्दाखेरि चाहिँ we have been conducting several series of knowledge networking series भनेर चाहिँ हामीले we have been conducting since 2020 को beginning देखि where we focus on different topics and one of the major topic is fossil fuel extraction global perception to local perception and actions भनेर चाहिँ we have been conducting it and throughout our series we have been trying to influence we have been trying to create awareness among people of Nepal as well as the international participants that about the current context, what Nepal is going towards from like fossil fuel dependency to थियो but now we are ourselves going to आफूले चाहिँ fossil fuel extraction पनि गर्न गइरहेको छौं भन्ने कुरालाई चाहिँ अगाडि राखेर र किन चाहिँ हामीले यो क्याम्पेन रन गरिरहेछौं why as we हाम्रो एउटा major group not only Powershift Nepal but we have larger group of those environmentalist climate activists हरु जसले चाहिँ यो कुराको अगेन्स्ट चाहिँ कुराहरु उठाइराख्नु भएको छ र त्यो कारणले गर्दाखेरि नै we are doing several webinars and several actions since 2019 को September देखि also pandemic भन्दा अगाडि we have done several on ground actions हामीले चाहिँ कोलाबोरेटिभ लाइक 5-6 अर्गनाइजेसन्सहरूसँग मिलेर पनि चाहिँ डिफ्रेन्ट स्ट्राइक्सहरू पनि गरेको थियौँ, विच वाज अल्सो मतलब हामीले गरेको थियौँ भनेर मात्र नभएर इट ह्याड सम मेजर इम्प्याक्ट लाइक हाम्रो चाहिँ कभर पनि भएको थियो इन्टरनेसनली नेसनली न्युजहरूमा पनि चाहिँ दिस ग्रुप अफ पिपल नेपालको चाहिँ युथहरूले चाहिँ दे हेभ डिमान्डेड के अरे दे हेभ डिमान्डेड नो ओइल ड्रिलिङ भनेर चाहिँ न्युजहरू पनि आएको थियो र त्यो कारणले गर्दाखेरि नै फर्दर वी रियलाइज कि देयर निड्स टु बी मोर अवेरनेस अबाउट द इस्यु पिपल निड टु नो भन्ने कुरालाई फोकस गरेर हामीले चाहिँ यो प्रोग्रामहरू गर्दै आइरहेको छौँ र त्यही क्रममा नेपालको चाहिँ सिनारियो अहिले कशिशजीले पनि मोर डिटेलमा चाहिँ भन्नुहुन्छ र अहिलेको लागि चाहिँ सर्फेसली नेपालले 2019मा चाहिँ चाइनासँग एग्रिमेन्ट साइन गरेको थियो त्यो चाहिँ 10वटा साइट्स अफ नेपालमा चाहिँ ओइल एक्सप्लोरेसन गर्ने र त्यहाँनिर चाहिँ एक्सप्लोरेसन पछि चाहिँ फोसल फ्युल चाहिँ एक्सट्र्याक्ट गर्ने भनेर प्लान चाहिँ छ त्यो हुँदा चाहिँ 2019मै चाहिँ दैलेखमा चाहिँ स्टार्ट भइसकेको थियो 2019को दैलेखमा एक्सप्लोरेसन स्टार्ट भयो 2020 एट द बिगिनिङ अफ 2020 जनवरी अर फेब्रुअरी इट ह्याड अलरेडी एन्डेड अनि त्यो एक्सप्लोरेसन सकेपछि बिकज अफ पेन्डेमिक मेबी फर्दर नभएकोले अहिले दे माइट बी प्रोसिडिङ टुवर्ड्स एक्सट्र्याक्सन पनि सो त्यही चिजलाई चाहिँ फोकस गरेर आज हामीले नो टु फोसल फ्युल एक्सट्र्याक्सन वाइ भन्दाखेरि वी थिङ्क कि देयर आर सेभरल मेथड्स अफ फोसल फ्युल एक्सट्र्याक्सन र त्यो फोसल फ्युल एक्सट्र्याक्सनको मेथडमा चाहिँ एनी हाउ ग्राउन्डलाई फ्र्याक्चर हुन्छ त्यो फ्र्याक्चरिङको प्रोसेसमा दे इन्सर्ट मेनी केमिकल्स हार्मफुल केमिकल्स अनि त्यही क्रममा चाहिँ त्यो केमिकल्सहरू अन्डरग्राउन्ड वाटरमा चाहिँ कन्टामिनेटेड हुन्छ र सोइलहरू पनि कन्टामिनेटेड हुन्छ विच इज अल्टिमेटली लिङ्क्ड विथ डिफ्रेन्ट रिभर हाम्रो रिभरहरूसँग कनेक्टेड हुन्छ र त्यो सोइल र रिभर कनेक्टेड भएपछि हाम्रो बायोडाइभर्सिटी लस कम्युनिटीमा चाहिँ ठुलो इम्प्याक्ट पर्नेछ र त्यो सँगैसँगै चाहिँ सेस्मिक एक्टिभिटीहरू पनि इन्क्रिज हुन्छ भन्ने सेभरल रिसर्चहरूले चाहिँ देखाएको छ र अर्को भनेको चाहिँ वी थिङ्क द्याट वी एज हामी मात्र नभएर कुनै पनि कन्ट्री बिकज एट टुडेज कन्टेक्स्ट वी डिमान्ड क्लाइमेट जस्टिस होइन क्लाइमेट जस्टिसको कुरा गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ वी डिमान्डिङ क्लाइमेट जस्टिस एट द सेम टाइम and at the other hand we are not trying to energy transition rather we are following same conventional fossil fuel extraction method pani and we are still trying to depend on fossil fuel भन्ने कुरालाई चाहिँ we don't support र त्यही कारणले गर्दा नि आज हामीले चाहिँ यो वेबिनार कशिशजीसँग चाहिँ मोर यो कुरामा बुझ्नलाई र अरूलाई पनि बुझाउनलाई चाहिँ आजको वेबिनार अर्गनाइज गरेको छौँ talking about our speaker today, Kashish Das Shrestha ji. Kashish Das Shrestha ji is a National Geographic Explorer 2019 ko. He is a former advisor to Parliament's Natural Resources and Means Committee and Water and Energy Committee. He has been conducting research regarding oil exploration since last decade and have published many articles from 2012 to 2015 related to the topic. Also, I think I would like to ask him to give his introduction more briefly. Maybe there is a lot more than what I mentioned just now. So I'd like to hand over to Kashish ji to talk more about yourself, a little bit detail, and then we'll move towards the question and answers.
Sure. Good morning, Sagarika. Thank you so much for having me on today for the Powershift Nepal's discussion on oil exploration in Nepal and your kind introduction. I think I'll just add that this is a topic that I started researching, I think 2007 so it's something I've been following on for many years. And so I'm very pleased that I get to talk about this today with you and your audience.
Just a bit, I'll stop sharing the screen. So moving towards The question, I think, first, Ma, we'd like to know your experience while reporting about oil exploration projects in Nepal. Experience-लाई चाहिँ अलिकति डिटेलमा भनिदिनु भयो भने चाहिँ we would understand because um, I think नेपालमा चाहिँ it's been like long time नेपालको कन्टेक्स्टमा चाहिँ they have been talking about oil exploration, fossil fuel exploration projects. So maybe you could tell us more in detail about your research experience.
Sure. Actually, how I found out about this thing happening in Nepal, that they were looking for oil in Nepal, was, in the early 2000s. I'd read some short news about it in Nepali Times newspaper, a news magazine, and so it made me really curious because even then I was already researching environment issues. So मैले त्यो रिसर्च गर्नु खोज्दाखेरि चाहिँ it was very hard to find any detailed information. The newsमा जे आउँथ्यो त्यति मात्रै भेट्थ्यो. So it was very hard to find anything that went beyond what was being reported. And so I really wanted to get to the gist of it because I was pretty convinced even then that this would be a disaster for Nepal sooner or later. But through various other problems in Nepal, the project has always been delayed. And but for me, like, the research never stopped. And somewhere around 2008, I think 2008 or 2009, I was actually able to finally access the contracts. I mean, these are very heavy contracts. This is the contract that the government had signed with Texana, the American company, and this is the contract that the government had signed with Cairn, the Scottish company. So I found, I was able to find this from non-government sources, and that was the first time where I really got a chance to dig deep into exactly what this project was about.
So, you just talked about the agreement that Nepal government signed with Texana, and which was the next one?
The Cairn company, Cairn Energy.
Yeah. So, those both did those proceed, or they were just later चाहिँ त्यो भएको थिएन जस्तो लाग्यो होइन मलाई पछि चाहिँ.
Yes. So, the government, the current government, the government in Nepal signed the Chinese deal in 2019, even though the agreement with China was done sometime before that. The Chinese team, let's say 2019 मा आएर सर्वेहरू गर्यो. But this really began in Nepal in 1970s when the 1973 OPEC oil embargo happened, and countries like United Kingdom, United States, Japan, Netherlands were suddenly facing an oil crisis. They were looking for friendly countries that they could get oil from. And त्यति बेला चाहिँ World Bank को throughबाट Nepal became one of those countries where they thought, if they find oil, it'd be easy for them to have a friendly country with oil access. And so 1979, I think the first aerial survey was done in Nepal, and by 1982, Nepal had already set up a proper channel for oil companies to come into the country and look for exploration blocks. I think the Petroleum Exploration Promotion Project, PEPP, was formally set up by that time. And in 1988, I think Shell had come to Nepal, and they were the first ones to actually try to drill for oil in Nepal, in eastern Nepal, but they didn't find anything. So by 1991, they had already left. Shell says there was no potential for oil in Nepal. The government of Nepal's position has always been that if Shell had spent more time and dug deeper, they would have found oil. But Shell left, and then again, Nepal had no company for a long time. So that's when Texana came to Nepal, which is an American company. अनि Texana आएपछि after some years, Cairn भन्ने company came to Nepal, and then both of them it just so happened that's when the Maoist war began in Nepal, and so it was very difficult to work in Nepal at the time, and both the contracts have a force majeure clause in them, which is if a if the working conditions seem impossible, then the company can pause and delay their commitment. And so Cairn and Texana both regularly used force majeure clause from the contract. And eventually it got to a point where, in most countries, oil companies are desperately trying to find a way to get in in Nepal, both Texana and Karen said, you know what, we don't want to work in Nepal anymore. So the relationship between the government and these companies had gotten really bad, and both these companies left. And then we had two more companies come into Nepal after that. There was a company called BBB Champions Oil, which was also an American company. So they came in, but something really, when I spoke to the CEO of BBB Champions Oil in 2014, I think, he said in 2 years, they're going to have, no, within the end of the year, they're going to have oil in Nepal. But after speaking to him in a few months, I went to Kathmandu and I met with the chief of the petroleum exploration project at that time. And he said, after we signed the contract, we have not been able to communicate with this company at all. They don't return our phone calls, they don't return our emails. So government like government the contract signed news maayo, and then BB Champions all just disappeared. There was nothing going on. So the government unilaterally canceled their contract as well. And so that's when in 2015, when KP Oli became the Prime Minister of Nepal for the first time, he engaged China on this. And after he won the election and became the Prime Minister again in 2017, the Chinese deal really, picked up the pace. So that's a very brief history of all the companies coming in and leaving Nepal.
I think it would have make sense, some sense, if Nepal had already done some exploration in 1970s. But right now, it doesn't make sense that we are going to start. We are going to start extraction, not only exploration, but ultimately in process of extraction. So also, we'd like to know how is the overall socio-political scenario regarding oil exploration in Nepal. If you can explain us.
Sure. And quickly to touch on what you just said, it would have made sense for Nepal if it had already successfully found oil in the 70s or 80s and then entered the oil markets at that time. Maybe it might have done Nepal's economy some good. Hard to say, but the only reason the government has been so bent on this is because if you go to the Department of Mines and Geology and the Office of Petrol Exploration Promotion Project, they have this big jar with crude oil in it, and that's the one that they found in Dai Lake, I think 20 years ago almost. But it's that jar has been sitting in this office for years and years, and so on the basis of that, they're very confident that they can find oil त्यहाँनिर भनेर. तर यो socio political इस्युमा चाहिँ the thing with exploration for oil in Nepal has been, it has never been actually about oil exploration. It has always been a geopolitical issue. अब originally नेपालमा यो कुरा सुरु हुँदाखेरि पनि युएसए वर्ल्ड ब्याङ्कको थ्रुबाट आएको हो, किनभने त्यति बेला गल्फ कन्ट्रिजहरूसँग दे ह्याड अ प्रब्लम होइन, त्यो ओपेक इम्बार्गोले गर्दाखेरि. And then now with China again, it comes at a time when the Chinese government has made its presence very, very, felt in Nepali politics. And so the prime minister has not been shy about his relationship with the Chinese, with China. And so it kind of came in through that. नभए चाहिँ नि तपाईँको यो गभर्मेन्टले त इन्टरनेसनल कल गर्ने भनेको थियो फेरि, तर यो प्राइम मिनिस्टरले चाहिँ इन्टरनेसनल कलको सट्टामा डिरेक्टली गभर्मेन्ट टु गभर्मेन्टको डिलमा चेन्ज गरेको हो. सो geopolitics has always been a part of our petroleum exploration project in Nepal. Sociopolitically, on a local level, the thing is, this topic has never had sustained news and discourse in Nepal. कहिले पनि continuously जस्तै अब न्युजगढको जसरी अब 2-3 वर्ष भयो continuously कुरा आइरहेछ एकदमै large public sphere-मा. Oil exploration को बारे चाहिँ कहिले पनि त्यसरी हुँदै भएन. It would always be like there would be small news, then it would disappear, then there'd be another news, it would disappear. So it has never stayed in the public psyche. It has never had that presence like other issues. So we don't know how the local communities feel about it. We don't know how the local governments feel about it. So it's very hard to gauge what the national mood, generally might be about this topic. र अर्को समस्या के छ भने यसरी information ko gap hunदाखेरि it's very easy to believe the information that we see as positive. But let's say this is going to really benefit the country, we're going to make lots of money on it. That's what people will kind of fall into believing, and anything you say can easily be, if you criticize the idea, if you even point it out scientifically or economically, and it disagrees with their view, then you're accused of, being any number of things, anti-development, for example.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Actually, even speaking about it is called against the development. We can see getting some comment. Uh, we get some comments sometime when we talk about this topic in social media, or even try to talk among some circle who do not agree about the we usually put forward regarding fossil fuel extraction.
Right.
So I'd like to take one question in the comment box. Uh, does this mean we have no any detailed feasibility study of oil extraction in Nepal? I think this is probably regarding the first question that was asked. This is from Kala Koyu ji. So can you just answer that?
So, the project has moved relatively quietly since 2017, when Prime Minister KP Oli and the government of China signed this economic agreement, and China agreed to look for oil in Nepal. And by 2019, the Chinese had done the survey, and they wanted to move into more physical survey and test with extraction drills and all of that. But unlike, I mean, even getting these two old contracts it took me almost 2 years. But regarding this one, the current situation, the government hasn't really been forthcoming about information at all. So it's
Yeah.
even I'm at a blank. I met with the chief of the petrol exploration promotion project in November 2019. So it was about, just I think that more than 1 year ago. But he wasn't very interested in giving that many details about the project. So it's been difficult.
Yes. Yeah, I think that was the same time that we also visited him. Though because what we said him was that I'm student of environment science, so I would like to get some information about exploration project. And because I think it's not because we need to know whether the project is bringing some benefit or some disadvantage to us and community. So he asked us to sit, and then he told few things that was not that logical. And he did not give us any detail, but he talked about some of the thing that I asked, because I told him that he was very doubtful towards me, but I asked him few questions. He gave me some answers, but it was not he was very reluctant to give answers as well. As you have been saying, they are not open about anything related to the project. And that's true that they have not opened even the budget that they are going to spend, even the process that they are going to conduct while extraction. And also they're not opening the fact that EIA has not been conducted yet. I think they are very reluctant to give information because they knew that a lot of people are opposing against the situation, because that was the time when we all started uh, conducting events, strikes. It was the same time when we visited the department as well. So yeah, they have not been giving much information. So before taking the question from
I
chat box,
will,
I
I will
ask
add
you.
this to, sorry, can I just add something? So I will say this though, both these contracts, with Karen and Texana, the language is identical. It's the names are different, and then a few technical, it's different blocks from block 1 to 10. But the terms and conditions in both these documents are fairly identical. And and I don't know if that has changed very much in the contract with BB Champions in 2014 or with the Chinese government now. Maybe they just, again, once again, just changed the name, the block, and then did it. But one thing I do want to mention, like one detail that did strike me, my first time in contact with there's this illusion that this is going to make Nepal rich and all of that. I know you in this old contract, what it says is if they are able to produce 10,000 barrels of oil per day, then Nepal gets 10% of net petroleum from that. Right? So only if Nepal is producing more than 100,000 barrels a day, we get 40%. So even when if we're producing more than 100,000 barrels a day, Nepal will only get 40% net petroleum. And net petroleum is not not just like your average. If you make 100 barrels, you get 40 of them manasta hoina. So if you look at if the details are still similar to this, I don't see how there may be a reason that the government doesn't want this to become very public, because it becomes more clear that it may not be that much of a big deal for public interest.
Mhm. So, regarding that, later I'll also ask you a question related to it. But before that, could you tell us what do you think are the impacts that we are going to face if tomorrow, not only in the 10 location, but maybe they would also extract more location later if those projects get successful and the communities around the exploration side, extraction side would face the impact. What are the impacts do you think that they would face if the exploration and extractions happens in coming days?
So here's the thing, and perhaps I should have mentioned this at the very beginning for folks who may not be aware or familiar with this project. All of Nepal from east to west below Jure. So all of the Madhesh and lower hills of Nepal have been set aside for petroleum exploration, which means if any company, or in this case now China, it's a country instead of a company, if China finds that there may be oil in any part of Nepal from east to west, from the hills to the Indian border, then China will have the right to extract it. Now, the problem with this is where we grow our food. That's our agriculture base, the Tarai. A second issue, this is also where a lot of our most important national parks are. So these 10 blocks, they don't discriminate between farms, forests, nothing. Everything in the Tarai, Amru, Eastlehi, West Summer is within these blocks. Or this Dailik location where China is now looking to try and extract oil. You know, 100, less than 124 miles, about 200 kilometers south of Dai Lake, we have two national parks there, Baake and Bardia. So if we are exploring for oil, and if we are then moving to extracting oil and using all kinds of chemicals and physical exercises to get this oil out, chances of river pollution, chances of local ecology destruction is not just high, it's guaranteed. हाम्रो EIA भएकै प्रोजेक्टहरूमा त प्रब्लम्स देखिन्छ. अब यो जस्तो खालके प्रोजेक्टमा त त्यो पनि when there's a country involved, it's not even a private company that you can hold accountable. It's a country who is openly even shaping Nepal's politics. So this is very tricky, because if there's any ecological damage to be done, we will not be able to hold anybody accountable for it. And history, modern history around the world, you look at it, we see that there will be ecological consequences. People like to talk about countries like Norway and other countries. I think Nepalma oil it won't be like Norway, it'll be like Nigeria, or what Latin America was like in the 80s and 1990s. We will be bearing the worst of it, because our political scenario, let's say, more similar with that. And so the consequences is, and the other thing I wanted to add was this same block, east to west in the Tarai below the Chure Hills, their ecological situation is already facing severe crisis because of completely unregulated illegal mining of riverbeds, of sand, of soil, of rocks. Anything you can imagine is being illegally mined with political patronage from this region. So that, at the same time, that's also the fastest urbanizing part of Nepal. The Tarai and the urban centers there are expanding more and more. So you have like rapid urbanization happening. You have loss of habitat just because of the urbanization process. Then you have destruction of ecology because of illegal mining and other extractive industries in the area. You have this emerging problem with farms already being turned into brick factories instead of, more productive, sustainable uses. And then if you add petroleum exploration and extraction there is a heavy industry. So this is just going to take all the problems that already are there, which we should be fixing. And instead of fixing it, we're going to be adding an even larger problem there.
So can you relate this with economy, country's economy? For example, in general, what public think is when you talk about this, people don't realize what impact and automatically what that impact will make loss in economy of a country. So people don't realize that. So if we could relate those loss with the country's economy, and let us know that how in long term this is not going to bring economic prosperity. Instead, we are going to face loss of, you know, loss in loss of communities, resources, loss in biodiversity, loss in water resources. Also, a lot of diseases that is going to happen due to the industry, and we are ultimately going to face loss of country's economy as in total. If you could give us some insights on the topic.
You know, one of the arguments that people will make is, for example, we had an oil pipeline deal that was also years and years in the making, but a couple of years ago, the oil pipeline deal with India was finally completed. And so it made bringing oil into Nepal easier. So the logic that everybody offered for that, or the justification they offered was, well, if you build this pipe through a forest, yes, we have to cut out a forest for this pipe, and but we'll be saving all the pollution from the trucks that would have to bring this oil to the depots, because now it's going straight through the pipe. And then people may use a similar argument with oil exploration. It's like, well, petroleum exploration is the largest import for Nepal. That's where we spend all of our foreign reserves. So if we have oil in Nepal, then it'll help the economy. And people can make misguided arguments like that. But the logic here is, we're not Nepal shouldn't be finding ways to make petroleum more accessible. What Nepal needs to be doing is moving away from fossil fuel as much as possible. And we are in a situation as a country where we can do that because we're still developing. We can build a better foundation right now and build upon it more sustainably. So how do you make petroleum more accessible, more cheaper for the country, such as by looking for it in Nepal and possibly extracting in Nepal? Where the conversation should be happening is, like you said, what is the eco services loss incurred by a project like this? What is the pollution cost of a project like this? What is the natural disaster cost of a project like this? So these are the things that we don't really hear, proponents of projects like this wanting to discuss, because they know that if we start talking about ecological services, if we start talking about disaster preparedness versus disaster vulnerability, then they don't have a winning argument. So economically, our natural disasters, every year, floods are becoming worse, droughts are becoming worse, heat waves are becoming worse, cold waves are becoming worse. So we're seeing extremes of all kind of seasonalities. And so if we continue to engage in projects that make fossil fuel more available in Nepal at the cost of destroying existing natural ecologies, which are already under pressure, there is no way that we can argue that this is economically beneficial for Nepal. Not even in the short run, I don't think, because like I said, this oil, China would have to extract more than 100,000 barrels of oil a day, and then maybe we would get, you know, 40,000 of it. So it's there. I don't think there's one of the reasons Texana and Karen never explored for oil in Nepal physically and just kept pushing it down the road, especially for Karen, because they signed a contract with Nepal, then they signed a contract in Bangladesh, they kind of signed a contract in India. They worked in those two countries, but they ignored Nepal because they know that if you look at the bigger picture, even for an oil company, it's not a big thing. It's not very feasible in Nepal. It
Mhm.
made more sense for Karen to go and explore for oil in other countries around Nepal than to do it in Nepal itself. So I don't really think there's a very strong economic argument to be made at all, because Nepal's economy shouldn't be adding more dependency on fossil fuel based ideas and economic cycles. It should be moving away from that. Our economy should be built on the sustainability of things, not on things that are causing the problems of today.
Yes, definitely. So there was a question from the participant, so which is related to the earlier question, where they have asked that like we know that fossil fuel, we need to decrease fossil fuel dependency, right? So but we have not been able to do so. Therefore, what do you think, how do you think we can move forward, shifting transition from fossil fuel to alternative, and what are the challenges for the country like Nepal to lessen the fossil fuel dependency and move towards other energy sources in coming days? That was the one question. And next question is also related to the earlier question. Is it that finding oil would help the country build economy? I think you have already answered that. If you could answer the all your question that how do you think we can move from fossil fuel dependency to alternative sources? But we have not been able to do that. We know it should be, but we have not been able to do. So, what do you think are the challenges, and how do you think we can do this?
So here's the thing, sadly, and maybe not surprisingly, the biggest challenge is the political will. नेपालको पोलिटिकल सिचुएसन र पोलिटिकल विलले गर्दाखेरि नै हामी यो दलदलमा चाहिँ फसिरहेको हो. For example, I'll give you a very recent example. In 2017, I worked with parliamentarian Gagan Thapa, and we drafted the first bill to be tabled in the parliament that had an outline, and we said it should be a benchmark based outline on just Kathmandu transitioning to electric vehicles by 2030. So this was, this was the first bill ever in Nepal's parliament to be tabled that detailed how we could make this transition. And so it was fairly clear, and there are lots of other MPs signed on to Gagan Thapaji's proposal. It got registered in the parliament, but then this was election year, and then so in 2017, the Communist Party of Nepal, that is in power right now, they issued their own EV election promise. So the one table in the parliament said between 2017 and 2030, if we meet this benchmark, this is the way we can do the transition. So during the election, the Prime Minister's party said by 2020, they would meet this transition. And as we all know, come budget 2020, the government actually made it more expensive and more difficult for people to access electric vehicles in the country, right? And so this is the challenge. I mean, without political will, it becomes really hard, because now we know that people, the consumers, citizens of Nepal, if there is a better alternative, they're happy to do it. Right now, electric vehicle sales बढिरहेछ, किन्न नसके पनि मान्छेहरूले सकेसम्म at least interested छ, they understand the importance of electric vehicle. साझाले electric buses ल्याउन खोजिरहेछ, अर्को एउटा private companyले 4 electric buses ल्याएको थियो. So our Safa Tempo has always been, actually our Safa Tempo was almost a global model for electric mass transit, public mass transit. So we have the history, we have the willingness of the consumers to pay for it, we have the public interest for it, we have experts and policymakers who want to make it happen, we have entrepreneurs who want to make it happen. Unfortunately, our politics is such that it is not, instead of enabling it to happen, it's proving to be an obstacle. So right now, the biggest challenge is politics. It's not technology. If technology is accessible, technology is affordable, there are people who are willing to invest in this technology so that it becomes accessible to the public in Nepal. And private गाडीको मात्रै कुरा हैन, mass transitको कुरा पनि हो, which is perhaps what I hope takes up very fast. But politics is always what seems to be blocking this transition, and that's really sad. And it's a hard thing to move past. But we did see, right, of electric vehicle, the government increased the budget, and there was a public outcry, and they were forced to reduce it a little bit again. So without public pressure, um, we lose the battle. People will always want to do, it's not surprising if people in power want to work for vested interests that are not always public interests. But as long as the public are watchful and they are proactive, we have seen enough examples, even in Nepal, where the government is sort of under public pressure, forced to acknowledge they made a mistake and try to address it somehow or
Yes.
the other.
Yes, definitely. And their point was that electric vehicles are luxury items, luxury vehicles. While they increased the tax, they made the point that it is for a luxury, luxury,
Just ridiculous. The other thing that I found flawed in the electric vehicle tax increase was more powerful the electric vehicle, the more expensive.
expensive.
uh,
Yeah.
so that just makes like a bus much more expensive because a bus would be more powerful than a two-seater or a four-seater car. But we want to reduce the number of cars in Nepal also.
Yeah.
We don't want to, just because it's electric cars doesn't mean we want more cars on our streets. We want to overall develop our
Yes.
public transportation system, reduce the number of vehicles on streets, and make the air breathable so that people don't become sick when they breathe.
Yes, definitely. Um, so there is next question from Suraj Raj Joshi. What is the standard contract that other petroleum producing sign with exploring company, where producer country get the best benefit?
Oh, this can vary. I asked this with a couple of people, and that just varies between companies and countries. There's some things maybe basic that are there are fixed model भन्ने standard उ चाहिँ हुँदैन रहेछ. So this the one Nepal signed was probably assisted by World Bank, I imagine, because World Bank was the original funder and partner for developing this project in Nepal. But with the Chinese government, I would think maybe the Chinese government may have amended the contract and added their own inputs into it. So it will vary.
Before moving towards the question from participants, I'd like to ask you a question.
Sure.
Do you have an example, or have you been to any of the places, because you stay in United States, and there are a lot of examples to see and also talk about. If you know, and if you have been to the communities or any place where you can share the case study where people have suffered a lot due to such industry being established near their communities, or if you see the loss in ecosystem and surroundings due to the fossil fuel industry, or any other impacts that you have seen closely or have studied, or even faced nearby you, if you can share.
I've actually not been able to do that. I mean, it's in the news constantly in America, though. The problem with natural gas exploration, the problem with fracking. This
Mhm.
is regularly talked about in American media, in American public, in American politics. So यहाँनिर चाहिँ नि the topic never dies. I know you वर्षौंदेखिको topic, it's boiled up and it's come to a point where like when candidates are running for the presidency of America, public will ask them, do you support fracking? Do you support natural gas? So that's the difference. Like in Nepal, the topic never gets enough momentum because it's like there are so many fires, and you need to put out all these fires, and whichever is the biggest one burning. For example, right now, whether we like it or not, the biggest actual crisis for the country is the dissolution of the parliament, right? A democratically elected parliament. So instead of working on instead of having discussions on things like this, on Nijgad and other development issues, we're just trying to even just like make sure a dictator or an authoritarian regime is not established in the country. So we're constantly forced to rebuild our foundation or protect our foundation again and again because it keeps getting attacked, and we're never able to build up on that foundation. And so that's a huge problem in Nepal. So but in America, like, this is a big topic, and there are constantly news of like areas where fracking is done, hundreds of earthquakes, new earthquakes, small earthquakes every year, areas where projects were done and abandoned because right now there's excess oil in the market because of the pandemic. Demand is really low, and so there's excess pollution from burning off of natural gas. Projects have been abandoned, and locally ecologies have been impacted because of it. There's all kinds of problems very well established around the world. But I did
Uh,
go to Nepal, by the way. I did go to the site where Shell had drilled for oil
mhm.
back in 1989, I think. त्यहाँनिर चाहिँ नि, it was just a very small spot, maybe about 100 square feet जतिको. It was, and this is the thing, like it was in the middle of farms surrounded by trees. And so you imagine if Shell had found oil at that time, all of this farmland between Itari and Jhapa would have been, cleared out because they would think there's more oil to be pulled out from there. And so our Chaco Sejari, which is already barely hanging on, um, would have died out faster probably if we had discovered oil in the 80s or early 90s.
Okay, I'd just like to ask a question which has been asked from the Vikas Institute, so that it doesn't get lost later. Maybe you'll not be able to use it later because of other question. If you have the soft copies of those agreement, if you can send to the Vikas Institute, or if it is available online, if you could tell where we could get that.
I don't have a soft copy. These two hard copies are the only ones that I have. And I've made a lot of notes inside them. There's a lot of writing that I've done during the research, but I will try to find a way and make this public. It actually says, the contract actually says it can only be made public when both the government and the company agree to make it public. But since the companies have already backed out and the contracts are void now, I can probably make it public. So I'll find a way to share it with you soon.
I think the next question is very interesting because normally we see when the development works are being conducted in developing countries, then people and communities usually support those work because they think that is going to bring prosperity among them and they'll get enhanced and benefit from those projects. So the question is. There is a well-known sport of oil in Belbari Morang, where locals are demanding and showing dissatisfaction on government's delay in the extraction. The locals are now putting pressure to local governments. So, what is the politics of not going these projects ahead? It's not definitely that our government is thinking rationally.
It's an interesting thing. This comes up when you talk about projects anywhere around the world. This can happen because what it does in people's mind is that it makes the land prices higher. And so there is a interest among community members that if a big project comes to their town or their village, then the land prices become more expensive and then they can sell out or they can do whatever. You see that happening in America, in Latin America, anywhere around the world, it's a similar story. But that's where it becomes a little tricky. Like I was in Nijgard in 2019, and there were locals there who really, really wanted the project to come in. But their interest in the project coming in was not that it would benefit Nepal. They were very open that if the project came in, government would give them new land and also maybe some money until they could start farming in the new land again, and they'd also get a house. So their interest was not about nation building. Their interest was how it would benefit them. And so it gets very tricky because what do you do if the community wants to do something which is not in the bigger good? Or, so this place in Belbari Morang, for example, okay, sure, the local community may want to explore for oil there. But what if exploring for oil or extraction of oil in Belbari means more floods or some kind of other disaster, or even just more pollution, more earthquakes in other parts of Nepal around Belbari, or even other parts of Morang around Belbari? You know? So it's a very tricky line for sure, but that's where, if the government was accountable and rational and thoughtful, it would navigate these things so that it's very clear. If it affects A, B, C, D, E, then we don't do a project like this.
Mhm.
But right now, it's all whimsical. You know, before KP Oli became the prime minister, Nepal was going to do an international call. Then KP Oli became the prime minister. Then China was given the contract without doing it. What happens, if the prime minister changes in Nepal, maybe they'll decide to do an international call. And so this kind of fluidity about something so important just makes it impossible to think things through properly and have any kind of result in a desirable time period, but again, as I was saying earlier, community engagement is really important. This bill by thing, have people gone in there and talk to folks there saying, okay, you want oil, but this is what can happen, right? And so maybe they'll change their mind, or maybe the community will then become split. We don't know because these exercises haven't been done yet.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That people do not know what impact it is going to bring. That is the reason, main reason that also they have not seen the similar situations because we know that this is going to impact. So we find out the case studies we see in media. We try to connect with those things, so we know what are the impacts. But normally people do not know that the impacts are very severe and it is going to bring huge loss. So I think that is the reason that people and community usually intend to make those projects happen than oppose those kind of project.
There's this other thing also right now, but Nepal is just socioeconomically, it's at a place where people want to be rich really fast. You know, like 10 years ago, suddenly Nepal had a kidnapping problem because we just signed the peace deal. A lot of people had become very wealthy overnight, and everybody wanted to be rich. So kidnapping became a crisis in Nepal. Luckily that's gone down. But if you go through the Tarai, what you see is farmers are selling their land to businessmen any chance they get. And politically, what we're also seeing is a lot of, in Nepal, we know this term in Nepal, they call bhumafia. All these land dealers have become politicians, or have partnerships with political parties, or belong to political parties. So when someone in a community says, hey, let's dig for oil in our community, it's also worth looking at, this individual who's leading this voice in the community to look for oil. What political party does it belong to? What vested interest might be behind it? Because in Nijgard, we know for a fact that there's a lot of real estate development interest that wants Nijgard to happen. There's a lot of timber mafia interest that wants Nijgard to happen. These interests, they're not talking about the airport. For them, the airport is just an excuse for real estate issues, for timber issues, and for contract issues. So with all exploration, in Morang, for example, who there wants it and why. And it's also important to kind of look into it. So why is China um, spending all this time and resources? And we don't know how much resources, by the way, but let's assume they're spending um, a lot of resources into this. Why are they doing it? So this happened in 2017. Like, do we really think until Nepal went to China and said, look for oil in our country, China's 50-year energy plan had Nepal in their agenda and we're just waiting to come to Nepal? Of course not. China's energy plan was well thought out years ago. They have a long-term vision, 25-year, 50-year vision. Nepali Prime Minister or the Nepali delegation said, look for oil. It was an easy thing for them to do. So they sent a small team and they're looking for oil. If they find oil, they'll probably be happy to take it. But I don't I don't think that that is the reason China is looking for doing oil exploration work in Nepal. So there's always it's always important to look at what motives might be behind certain kind of agendas, or calls.
Yeah, definitely. We have known that China has, recently trying to explore in most of the least developed countries and developing countries where they could invest in fossil fuel industry. Especially, they have tried in Pakistan, Sri Lanka lately, and many other South Asian countries. So for the exploration and extraction projects. So, as you said, yes, definitely they might have other agendas behind exploration. Um, so, there are many questions coming.
Sure.
So, next question is, can we be able to quantify the impacts of petroleum exploration, like this much water loss or carbon dioxide emission per 1,000 barrel extracted? Do you?
Not that I know of, no, because we've not even extracted a barrel, so it's hard to kind of quantify the impact at the moment. I mean, other countries probably have done that study, but I don't know if it will be
In ours, we have not. Yeah, we have not. But maybe there are other methods to quantify such impact. Do you think?
we'll be able to extrapolate from other countries, similar
Mhm.
countries, for example, in India, if we look at oil. But then the thing is, in India, in Rajasthan, the terrain in Rajasthan and the accessibility to Rajasthan's oil extraction site would be very different from Dai Lake, for example, right? So if you're looking at environmental cost, then like how many trees had to be cut down to access the site in Dai Lake? What was the, every step of oil extraction would be different.
This probably would come in EIA, but I think Nepal's EIA would not explain all of these in details.
No, I'll give you a funny example of EIA. After the 2015 earthquake, the government had put out an EIA about something, and it literally said Haiti in the EIA. And so it was basically this person, whoever was working on the EIA, had copy pasted Haiti's post earthquake EIA and replaced it with Nepal, but in one place forgot to replace Haiti. It still said Haiti. So as far as our EIA goes, it's probably the worst benchmark.
So, are there any other ways? Sorry.
The most unreliable.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. We can see that in many of the projects. Any other ways to pacify the energy extraction? What can be the best approach to intervene from here? What is the current level of investment in fossil fuel exploration sector in Nepal?
I don't think there's a lot of the government is doing this essentially to get money, right? So even for giving out the contract, it got royalty, and then the companies pay for like the petroleum exploration promotion project. Small department. I think there's only like 3 or 4 people who are ever there. I always only see the chief and then the secretary outside, and then one other person. So I don't even know how many people work in PEPP. But the government is engaging in this project not to spend money, but to take money from whoever wants to look for oil in Nepal. So maybe it's taking royalty from China as well. We don't know because these details haven't been shared with us.
Okay. Do you think beyond not just environmental issues, petroleum extraction is also land right issues? From the way you briefly described, the contracts takes away right of resources below their land from the landowners.
Yes, that is a problem. I think our Nepal, I forget exactly, in our new constitution, in the natural resource and economic section, there is a section that addresses mining, khani सँग जोडिएको तर यो पेट्रोलियमको चाहिँ exactly case abuse, but I think generally otherwise it's not your rights. The land is yours, but what's under the land is not yours. I just
Mhm.
wanted to go back to I forgot to respond to the section about what can people do in the earlier question to pacify this.
Yes.
It's tricky. I mean, public pressure and public discourse really is the only in a democracy. You'd hope that's what kind of moves the needle in the direction you want it to go. But frighteningly, what I've seen in the Nijgar discourse is the government has basically experimented and successfully and succeeded in saying you can protest all you want, we're going to do what we're going to do. In fact, that's exactly the language the former tourism minister used. He said "Andolan garde gare huncha, we're going to make our airport." So that's not how democracy should function. It would be the same as saying you guys can continue to talk about stopping petroleum exploration and how bad it is, but we're going to go ahead and do it anyway. So if they say that, I don't know what we can do. I think we can try to pursue legal discourses. We can try and force, electoral process, or maybe it can become an agenda. But public protest, public activism, public discourse really is the best tools we have.
It's pretty weird that the leader of same party is actually trying to explore fossil fuel in Nepal, and then when you talk with the people from same party, some of the leaders tell that, oh, this should not happen. We should decrease fossil fuel dependency in Nepal's context. So I think the members from the same party do not have same view either, or maybe they do not have same vision vision that they want to take forward as a political party. So these conflicts is seen within the party. Do you think that Nepal's political stability, instability is also one of the reason where Nepal cannot is not able to proceed towards a certain vision that we have aimed in our policy, or in our agreements that we do with internationally. We do some agreements, we have some policies, and we have made some action plan from the government side, and we are not able to proceed that. Do you think there is some kind of gap in understanding that countries that country would want to move forward with a certain vision? Do you think there is gap in understanding among people, government authorities themselves, and political parties that talk about either proceeding, or some of the members are talking about for decreasing the fossil fuel dependency? What do you think is the gap in all of these? Because you have closely worked with I think government bodies as well, and you are closely worked with the political members as well.
It's
What is
it's it's
and
a mix of things. The political instability has, of course, always been a challenge for Nepal. It makes it very difficult for anything to be followed through, because someone new comes and they have their own agenda, they have their own ideas, and so which is why after the 2017 election, everyone had hoped that there's a super majority for 4 years, and Nepal was promised a lot of things. We were promised political stability, we were promised development. But what this supermajority did immediately was they wanted to start mining more, they wanted to start logging out forests more, they wanted to do ultra large infrastructure projects, and then they packaged it as development. They packaged urbanization and concretization as development. And so for the first time, we thought we had political stability, with a supermajority. But then, one, the visions they came up with turned out to be very, very destructive for Nepal. And two, we're seeing now, the supermajority itself is pretty much cracked, and the prime minister dissolved that supermajority. And so political instability is a challenge. But I also have a counterpoint to my own thing I had said earlier. For example, this China deal, the China exploration happening in Nepal. So we can say that Nepal wanted this done, invited the China. It becomes much more tricky if we were to consider that maybe China wanted to be physically present in this region of Nepal, just on the edge of Tarai, which borders India. And so they proposed to Nepal and said, we would like to do petroleum exploration in this part of your country. And then if that's the case, the you know then the government said okay. And so it gave up, it surrendered its rights to China by saying, fine, we let you do it, come and do it. So if that's the case, then things become really complicated, right? So even if the prime minister himself didn't want to do the project, but then there's a big foreign power, one of his most powerful allies, saying, no, we want this, we want to be in that part of Nepal for various reasons, for no reason at all, then what do? Then even if party members have different visions and ideas, it becomes tricky. But I'll give you another example. When I was working with parliamentarian Gagan Thapa, we were working on illegal sand and stone mining. So the committee, Natural Resources and Means Committee, was taking up the issue of illegal sand and stone mining in Nepal and trying to stop it and put regulations in. And so in the morning before the meeting, he and I were discussing, some of the talking points. And then he got a phone call from a very influential member of his political party, who basically called and said, I hear you talking about this issue. I just wanted to let you know that I also have these factories that work on this issue. So, don't do anything that would affect his business. basically. So he was calling a parliamentarian who was doing a hearing on illegal mining and saying, "Don't crack down on illegal mining if you can." And and so I mean, we ignored that. He ignored that, and so the committee did make some strict guidelines. Um, but even at that time, the parliament, I don't know if you remember, but even then the parliament got dissolved, and then we had an interim prime minister, and so the mining sector used that void and got away with everything. And of course, mining today in Nepal is illegal mining in Nepal today is worse than it's ever been. And so it does get complicated when important members of the party have a different vision, and then MPs have a different vision. But at least if it's within the party, if it's within the system, you can do what Natural Resource Means Committee had done at that time. But in this oil exploration case, if it's China who requested to Nepal that they want to come to Nepal and do oil exploration from east to west, it would be a very strategic thing for them to do. And I would think it would be harder for a political party in Nepal to say, no, now we don't want you here anymore, go back. Once you
Mhm.
once China is physically in a location in a government to government agreement, it would be very, very difficult now to tell them leave. It would
So
be a bit of a diplomatic issue, I think.
yeah. So similar, I mean, linking with the same question, there is a next question. Oil drilling project does not in line with Nepal's commitment to Paris climate agreement. And Nepal, do you think it can gain and build political momentum?
It could, but then look at Niger. Right, Nijgad is completely counterintuitive to our sustainability goals commitments. It makes natural disasters worse. It'll make floodings in that region worse. It will make access to water, and it'll negatively impact not just Nepal, but the entire Indo-Gangetic plains. Hydrology of the entire region will be affected by it. But the government wants to push through it anyway. So I don't think it'll be that easy. The other problem is government can take a very tricky stand where they tell international partners that this is a national development agenda, and so outsiders don't get to dictate, right? But for me, like for example, I think one of the ways a project like Nishgad in Nepal would end is if our international development partners took up this risk and said, "We are your biggest funders of environment conservation, and this project jeopardizes everything that we've worked for the last 2 decades. And so we really, really urge you to not do this project because it undermines the millions of dollars we've spent in Nepal helping you to protect your and conserve your environment." But from what I've been told, the government made it very clear and asked INGOs and development partners not to speak about this topic because it's a national development agenda. And so that's just another interesting way to shut down a potential challenge, right? So protesters, young people protesting in the street, minister says, "Oh, they can protest. We'll do what we want." International organization says, "Hey, this is not good. This is, we're giving you money to save the environment, but you're taking this money and you're destroying the environment." Government says, "Don't talk. If you want to continue working in our country, you know, this is our national agenda." So it becomes very tricky. But because we're signatory to a lot of international environment related things, I think worst comes to worst, it gives us room and space to make the noise louder. And louder the noise becomes, the harder it becomes for the government to ignore it. And
Uh,
easier for other parties to say, "Oh, this noise is becoming louder," and nudge the government more.
okay, I think we'll just take two more questions and then move towards the next part of the session because I think we are taking much of everyone's time as well because there is a lot of question and interesting insights plus because we have a lot of queries within ourselves and then also we would like to hear from you. Therefore, I think there are a lot of questions coming in. There is next question. Will India allow China to close near their border? I think,
So your exploration close to the border,
yeah, yeah, close to the
it,
border.
I mean, they can't do anything explicitly. If the government of Nepal has invited China to explore for oil, and if they find oil in Biratnagar, then China's going to look for oil in Biratnagar. It becomes very tricky. But I don't think India is going to be able to say anything explicitly. You know, they'll probably find a way to try and do it strategically, because obviously India wouldn't want a Chinese camp set up right on the border.
Yeah.
China would.
I think if China would make base of around 10 sites in Nepal of such exploration, I think that situation would be really very,
Yeah,
I,
not just ecologically, politically,
yeah,
for Nepal that would
politically,
be problematic.
yeah.
Yeah,
Because we can see those examples in other, developing list of countries that even India has been governing Bangladesh, Bhutan, somehow from also Nepal, not only them, but uh, politically they have been governing us since long time.
yeah.
Uh,
There's always going to be, and Nepal always has that challenge because you have two large neighbors, and it would have
mhm.
been easier if those two large neighbors got along really well. But those two large neighbors have been at war for a long time, so it makes it all the more trickier for Nepal. You know, मिल्ने मिल्ने छिमेकीहरू भए सजिलो हुन्थ्यो नि छिमेकीहरू नि
Yeah.
छिमेकीहरू के गर्ने
So last question. EIA practice appears to be an important point of intervention through environmental advocates in pushing environmental engineering for more and more excise. So that's not a question. That's just a
comment.
statement. Um, including India has putting deadline years to stop sales of fossil fuel-based vehicles as close by 20. India is working for 20. If anyone of us would like to speak about anything, you may just put asterisk in chat box, and then I would allow you to speak.
I will add to what Digo Vikas has said in the chat. You know, the biggest, easiest way for Nepal's transition to EV is the fact that both China and India have very, very aggressive electric vehicle transition plans. And so, as it becomes more feasible in those two countries, it definitely becomes more realistic and feasible for Nepal as well, especially India. You know, I would hope for a very rapid transition to electric vehicles in India because that would have a direct impact on Nepal.
This is from Sahil Dai.
I saw his message.
So I'd also like to request everyone to put, insert your email address in chat box so that later for any of such sessions or any of the activities that we'd be conducting regarding the topic, we will definitely email all of you. And moving forward, I'd like to ask, because we have been involved in two of the major, solidarity actions lately. One of the action is Sale Must Fall, which we are jointly working with some of the countries from Latin America and Europe. And next is Asia Climate Rally that we are working with the Asian groups and youth, demand against the fossil fuel financing. Both of are against. One of Selma's fall is more against fracking, and Asia Climate Rally is more against fossil fuel financing, which is also focused on fossil fuel financing from banking sector as well as other sectors. So from if she is still available, let me check. I think she left.
एकछिन बोल्न पाउने भने हो
Oh,
सोइल दिगो विकास
सल्दै हुन्छ दाइ
त्यही त आई रियली एम ह्याप्पी टु बी इन दिस डिस्कसन मैले खास पुरुष श्रेष्ठ सरलाई पनि इन्भाइट गरेको थिएँ क्या पुरुष श्रेष्ठ सर चाहिँ उहाँ आउनु पाउनु भएन उहाँले चाहिँ त्यो ट्याक्सियाले एक्सप्लोरेसन गर्दाखेरि नेपाल टिम लिड गर्नुभयो जियोलोजिस्ट बट देन पछि चाहिँ युएनडिपीको इन्भाइरोमेन्टल जियोग्राफिकल केही टिम लिड पनि गर्नुभयो अनि अहिले चाहिँ इज क्वाइट क्लियर क्या यो आई थिङ्क हि वाज इन्गेज इन यो नेपालको जियोलोजी डिपार्टमेन्टको कुनै उसमा पनि इन्भल्भ हुनुहुन्थ्यो अनि इज क्वाइट क्लियर अबाउट कि यो दिस विल नट बेनिफिट नेपाल र हाम्रो लागि एकदमै इम्पोर्टेन्ट इन्साइडर पनि हुनुहुन्छ
But that would be good if you had made it today.
तपाईँले भेटेको भन्नुभयो
होइन आज आउनु भएको भए राम्रो हुन्थ्यो कुरा सुन्नलाई
या त्यही त उहाँको लागि त अब यो आई थिङ्क इज इन युएस मेबी यो राति 2 कति बज्छ होला भनेर भन्नुभएको थियो हो बट देन वी क्यान रिच आउट टु हिम फर द ऊ पनि त त्यही त हो यो स्केल अफ ऊ चाहिँ अब यो सानो उसले त हुँदैन यो त्यही त अनि त्यो दाइलाई पनि इन्टरनेसनली अरूले यस्तो प्रोसेसमा कसरी गर्यो भन्ने कुराको सिक बिकज वी हेभ बिन इन्टु तपाईँले यो के अरे अकुपाई मुभमेन्टको कभरहरू पनि गर्नुभएको थियो सो
I mean 350 ko model really was the best for this. I think 350 they did a really good couple of campaigns, the divestment campaign and then the keep it in the ground campaign. Those campaigns are really good. But Nepal ko context ma chahi, I think part of the reason these campaigns don't affect them is they always see it as के भन्ने बाटोमा एउटा ठाउँमा गएर प्रोटेस्ट गर्छ अनि पत्रिकामा फोटो आउँछ दे डोन्ट फिल इट डजन्ट एफेक्ट देम पर्सनली होइन बट द्याट्स वाइ मलाई अब मैले त पहिला सीता राईको केसमा मैले जुन त्यो प्रोटेस्ट अर्गनाइज गरेको थिएँ 2011मा आई थिङ्क इट वाज लाइक सो यु डाउनलोड द लेटर यु साइन इट एन्ड यु ह्यान्ड डिलिभर टु द प्राइम मिनिस्टर्स अफिस भनेर गरेको थिएँ नि त्यो गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ सडनली इट बिकेम अ प्रब्लम बिकज almost 100 people showed up to Prime Minister's office to give a letter. And I guess this but it was really impactful, I think, because it was almost like a physical engagement. It wasn't like it and maiti garma nalama basera halla gariracha भन्ने खालके भएन नि त्यो त लाइक आफ्नो निवासको बाहिर आएर चिठी दिइराछ गेटको सिपाहीलाई भन्ने खालके भयो so with issues like Nijgat and petroleum exploration in Nepal, it's worth exploring that kind of more direct engagement होला जस्तै अस्ति कमलपतिको केसमा मेयरको अफिस अगाडि भएको थियो हैन मेयर हुनुहुन्न थियो obviously because मेयर कहाँ हुनुहुन्छ कसलाई के थाहा है हाम्रो काठमाडौँको मेयर एटलिस्ट डेप्युटी मेयरसँग भेट भयो उहाँहरूको सो अब यसमा पनि लाइक अब इन्भाइरोमेन्ट मिनिस्टरलाई like who's our environment minister right now? I don't even know. Appoint bhaisakyo ki hunu bhako chaina bhanera. Tara I think you'd be pretty surprised if people showed up signed petitions and suddenly there's 100-200 people handing over signed petitions to him about this project. So that creates a very different kind of psychological pressure, I think. And media le coverage gardakheri pani it wasn't like मैले समाचारमा सुनेको थिएँ भन्न मिलेन नि अफिसमा आएर चिठी नै 100 जनाले चाहिँ सेक्रेटरीलाई चिठी नै छोडेर गएपछि त त्यो डज गर्नलाई अलिकति गाह्रो हुन्छ हैन सो त्यो खालके कन्फ्रन्टेसनल त नभनौं तर अलिकति डाइरेक्ट इन्गेजमेन्ट instead of just sloganeering and त्यो मण्डलामा प्रोटेस्टिङ भन्दाखेरि it's worth trying. अब केही त ट्राई गर्नु पर्यो के हैन सबै चीजै ट्राई गर्नु पर्यो so all of the options and the other kind of protest अब त्यो rally मैदेगर मण्डला अब we've been doing that on so many issues हैन so it's almost like उहाँहरुलाई पछिसक्यो के त्यो त त्यो हुन्छ त्यहाँ यङ केटाकेटीहरु जम्मा हुन्छ इन्ट्रेस्टिङ स्लोगन्स लेख्छ इन्ट्रेस्टिङ थिएटर गर्छ भन्ने जस्तै भइसक्यो there's no direct engagement हुन्छ नि so I think it's good to break that sense of comfort for them and have some kind of direct engagement both on Nijgat and this issue on petroleum
I think we have tried long COVID ko time ma we tried to write later and हामीले चाहिँ डाइरेक्ट नभएर त्यो टाइममा अब उ थिएन मोबिलिटी खासै गर्न नमिले भएको टाइम थियो सो वी ट्राइड टु सेन्ड थ्रु इमेल चाहिँ हामीले लाइक 30 जना जसले चाहिँ इमेल एउटै इमेलमा चाहिँ डाइरेक्ट चाहिँ गरेको थियौँ त्यतिखेर चाहिँ बट वी हेभ नट पोस्टेड इन के भन्छ उहाँहरूको हेड क्वार्टरमै गएर चाहिँ पोस्ट गरेको छैन
पोस्ट गर्दा पनि लाइक फिजिकली भनौँ न अब अहिले गर्नुपर्छ फर इक्जाम्पल 4 फिट अथवा 6 फिटको डिस्टेन्स राखेर 100 जनाको लाइन लेटर मात्रै दिन आएको भनेर पालेपछि लेटर दिँदाखेरि इज लाइक तमासै हुन्छ नि एक किसिमको
फेरि यस्तो टपिकहरुमा हार्डली पिपल इन्ट्रेस्टेड पनि हुन्छ अनि हार्डली दे सपोर्ट पनि रहेछ जस्तो
Mm.
I
because
think अहिले निजगढमा it's really caught people's interest, right? So
निजगढको चाहिँ
निजगढले चाहिँ अब मान्छेहरूको attention अलिकति capture भएको छ. And I think it's important for people to kind of see that petroleum exploration also has almost the same level of disastrous implication. के साँच्चीकै full-fledged petroleum exploration भयो भने नेपालमा I mean, it's pretty disastrous. हुन्छ नि किनभने यो extractive industry हो, foreign entity हो. So they have zero liability regarding Nepal. उनीहरूको their only interest is petrol भेट्यो भने petrol निकाल्ने हो, लाने हो, बेच्ने हो. त्यसको impact locals like के हुन्छ भन्ने त not their priority at all. And so I think it is important if the same group that is so engaged in Nijgad also engaged in this. But I also understand a little bit of sense of burnout. भनौँ न अहिले काठमाडौँमा यतिजना यङ मान्छेहरू के को बारे मात्रै प्रोटेस्ट गर्ने क्या रेप केस भन्यो रेप केस गर्ने प्रोटेस्ट गर्नु परेको छ केही हुँदैन कोभिडको लागि पनि गर्नु परेको छ केही हुँदैन so it's like I said earlier they've lit up so many fires people are just trying to put out what they can. So
no, you recently also got comment from medical field. Kumanche had commented me, why do you always keep fossil fuel financing ko kura? Why do you always keep khali climate change ko kura? Why don't you talk about COVID, the COVID crisis, health ma ke bhako? So this is so भनेर चाहिँ मलाई उल्टै कमेन्ट पनि पाएको थिएँ मैले होइन बिकज पिपल आर मोर कन्सर्न्ड अबाउट कोभिड अहिलेको कन्टेक्समा उनीहरूको चाहिँ त्यो इमोसन्सहरू त्यसमा चाहिँ कनेक्टेड भएले
you should tell these folks that the more natural resource extraction that we do into forests and rivers and hills, the higher the chances of pathogens being released and outbreaks like this happening.
I've tried to answer, but I think they have because direct medical field ma bhaunale they have seen so many of the cases त्यो आँखाबाट नै चाहिँ कस्तो केसेसहरु देयर इमोसन डिफरेन्ट देन आवर्स सो त्यो कारणले गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ उहाँहरुको थट र हाम्रो थट चाहिँ डिफरेन्ट हुने रहेछ यसको यो कन्टेक्स्टमा पनि so let's move towards next part of the session. यसमा चाहिँ I'd like to call Salonika. Salonika चाहिँ Powershift नेपालबाट Cell Must Fall campaign-मा चाहिँ directly involved भएर work गरिरहेछ internationally हाम्रो teamबाट. So if she would like to share some of the things that have been done and also been planning.
Thank you. Thank you for the wonderful program and the very informational discussion. So Shell Must Fall is a global anti-fracking coalition. Fracking has been recognized as being extremely damaging to the health of both natural resources and human communities. So as a consequence, several countries of the global north have banned fracking within their borders, but companies from the same countries engage in fracking in countries of global south, where in addition to the ecological and health damages, they also commit direct human rights violations. And this situation is in Nepal can also become similar to this scenario because as China has pledged to be carbon neutral by 2060, it is it is starting new extraction projects in Nepal. So it's the same kind of scenario or hypocrisy that we see everywhere else in the world. So Shell Must Fall is a movement to highlight the atrocities of the companies of global north and what they're doing to the people of the global south. And through our global actions, we amplify the struggles of the front lines of global south within the general public of the global north and hold the companies accountable. So we completed our first global action on December 11th, where with participation from over 20 countries. And our next global day of action will be on March 22nd, which is also the World Water Day. So for this action, we are collaborating with any groups or individuals who are working on water-related issues to fight for a common cause, because as we've talked about in this discussion, like fracking is fracking and even oil extraction is a very water intensive project, whereas we are facing water scarcity all over the world, and it also toxifies our remaining water sources. So yeah, please join us if possible.
Thank you, Solonika. Also, we will also have, because one of my friend was here, would be speaking about Asia Climate Rally, but I think she had to go. So we will also be having next Asia Climate Rally probably on same month. So just informing everyone about Asia Climate Rally, and for any local actions together. I think for Asia Climate Rally, they have to contact us for any collaborative action that we would plan locally. So probably our campaign that we focus on all of these two are the oil exploration that is happening in Nepal. And moving forward, if there is any questions that anyone would like to ask at last, or anyone would like to put their opinions or views at the last, please, you may, if there is anyone.
Looks like we covered most things.
Yeah, and also I think we have already passed almost 1.5 hours of our time with wonderful session, wonderful insights, and also I think there are a lot of things that we got to know from Kailash, and also hoping that in coming days we could learn more from Kailash, and we could even discuss more about topics, so that he could help us how we can move forward in the topic, because I think we really need experts view and expert suggestion for this topic and our campaign that we are moving forward. Um, okay, so if anyone would like to get more information regarding campaign, regarding the topic, regarding any of the activities related to fossil fuel financing and projects in Nepal, so you may please leave your email address in our chat box before we end our talk show. And before ending, I'd like to thank all of the participants. I think most of them have already left. It's already 11:30 here. And I'd like to thank Kailash from Powershift Nepal and every one of us for his presence. And also Rajiv sir for providing us today's space and his time for the session. Thank you so much, Kailash, and thank you so much, Rajiv sir. And we hope that we'll get more connected and discuss more on the topic in coming days.
Good to be here.
Thank
Thank you.
you very much, everyone.